A man walks into a failing market, not failing loudly, not collapsing on the news, quietly failing, the kind that looks stable until you look closer. It's 1988. Wall Street is still shaking off the crash of 1987. Investors are cautious, money is nervous, confidence is thin, and then Warren Buffett does something that, at the time, looks irrational. He puts a massive chunk of his company's money into a soda company, not a tech breakthrough, not oil, not some futuristic bet, sugar water. By the early 90s, that decision will turn into billions, not millions, billions. And the strange part? The secret wasn't timing the market. It wasn't predicting trends. It wasn't even particularly complicated. It was something much more uncomfortable. Because what Buffett really saw was not a company. He saw a machine. And once you understand that machine, you start seeing it everywhere. Let's slow down. Before the billions, before the legend, before people turned him into a myth, Buffett was just a very patient observer. And in the late 1980s, he was staring at something most investors had already dismissed: Coca-Cola. At that moment, Coca-Cola wasn't exciting. It wasn't new. It wasn't growing explosively. It was old, a legacy brand, already global, already famous, already everywhere, which, in the language of Wall Street, usually means one thing: no more upside. Investors were chasing growth, technology, disruption. Buffett was looking at something else entirely: consistency, predictability, and something even more powerful: habit. Here's the part most people miss. Buffett didn't buy Coca-Cola because it was cheap. He bought it because it was inevitable. That sounds dramatic, but it's actually very precise. See, Coca-Cola had already solved one of the hardest problems in business. It didn't need to convince people to buy its product. People already wanted it. Not occasionally. Daily. Sometimes multiple times a day. And that changes everything. Because when demand is that deeply embedded, the rules of the game shift. You're no longer chasing customers. Customers come to you. Let's break the system down. Forget the brand for a second. Strip it to its core. Coca-Cola takes inexpensive ingredients: water, sugar, flavoring. It sells them at a massive markup. That's not unique. What is unique is this: it sells them billions of times in nearly every country on Earth. And it does it through a distribution system that is almost impossible to replicate. Not hard, impossible. By the 1980s, Coca-Cola had built relationships with bottlers, retailers, and distributors across the globe. This wasn't something you could just copy. It took decades. It took trust. It took infrastructure. It took patience. Which is why competitors struggled. You can create a drink. You can market a drink. But getting that drink into millions of refrigerators, stores, and restaurants consistently is a different game. That's the moat, not the taste, not the logo, the system. Buffett understood this intuitively, but he also saw something deeper: pricing power. A dangerous phrase if you don't understand it, but a powerful one if you do. Pricing power means this: you can raise your prices, and people still buy. Not because they don't notice, but because they don't care enough to stop. Think about it. If Coca-Cola raises the price of a can by a few cents, do you stop drinking it? Most people don't. They might complain, they might notice, but they don't change behavior. And that tiny increase, multiplied across billions of servings, becomes enormous. This is where the math starts getting uncomfortable, because it reveals something most people ignore. Small advantages, repeated at scale, become massive outcomes. Buffett wasn't chasing growth. He was buying durability, and durability compounds. Let's talk about the timing. Coca-Cola had just gone through a strange period. The new Coke fiasco had shaken confidence. Management had made a very public mistake. The stock wasn't in favor. And this is where Buffett's skepticism shows up. He wasn't asking, is Coca-Cola perfect? He was asking, is this business still inevitable? And the answer was yes. Because even after the mistake, people came back, not slowly, quickly, almost instinctively. That told him something critical. The bond between the product and the consumer wasn't fragile, it was deeply rooted. So he bought. And he didn't just buy a little, he committed. By the end, Berkshire Hathaway owned roughly 7% of Coca-Cola. That's billions of dollars today. At the time, it was a bold move, even controversial, because again, this wasn't a growth story. This was a belief in something much quieter. Now, let's watch what happens next. Through the 1990s, Coca-Cola expands aggressively. Emerging markets open up, consumption rises, distribution deepens, and the machine starts doing what it was designed to do: scale. Revenue grows, margins stay strong, dividends increase, and Buffett doesn't sell. That's important, because most investors would have. After a big gain, the instinct is to lock it in. Take profit, move on. Buffett does the opposite. He holds. Because the real return isn't in the initial gain, it's in the compounding. Here's the mechanism. Coca-Cola generates cash. A lot of it. It returns part of that cash to shareholders as dividends. Buffett takes those dividends and keeps holding the stock. Over time, those dividends grow, not linearly, exponentially, because the company keeps raising them. At some point, Buffett is earning hundreds of millions per year, just in dividends, from this one investment. Not from trading, not from selling, from owning. That's the machine in full motion. And here's where the irony creeps in. The thing that made Coca-Cola boring is exactly what made it powerful. Predictability, routine, habit. Things investors often ignore because they don't look exciting. Let's contrast that with what most people chase: new industries, fast growth, disruption, and there's nothing wrong with those, but they come with uncertainty, fragility, volatility. Buffett wasn't avoiding risk, he was redefining it. For him, risk wasn't about price fluctuations, it was about permanence. Would this business still exist? In a meaningful way? Decades from now? Coca-Cola passed that test. Now let's zoom in on something uncomfortable, because this is where the story stops being just about Buffett and starts being about how the system actually works. Coca-Cola sells a product that, objectively, is not essential. You don't need it to survive. It's not improving your productivity. It's not solving a complex problem. And yet, it generates enormous wealth. Why? Because human behavior is predictable, not rational. Predictable. People don't optimize every decision. They default. They repeat. They choose what's familiar. Coca-Cola didn't need to win an argument. It needed to win a habit. And once it did, the economics followed. Buffett saw that clearly, and he leaned into it. Not emotionally, not ideologically, mechanically. Now let's talk about the scale of the outcome. Buffett's initial investment in Coca-Cola was around $1.3 billion. Today, that stake is worth tens of billions, and that's not including the billions in dividends he's collected over the years. This wasn't a trade, it was a transformation. But here's the part that gets overlooked. This wasn't inevitable. It looks obvious in hindsight. It always does. But at the time, it required a very specific way of thinking, a willingness to ignore noise, a focus on fundamentals that most people find boring, and a kind of patience that is deeply uncomfortable. Because patience doesn't feel like action. It feels like inaction. It feels like missing out. It feels like being wrong, for a while. Buffett was fine with that. Most people aren't. Now let's zoom out. Because Coca-Cola is not just a story about a company, it's a template, a pattern, a way of seeing the world. There are businesses that chase demand, and there are businesses that become demand. Coca-Cola became demand. And once you cross that line, the economics change permanently. You can raise prices, you can expand margins, you can weather mistakes, because the underlying behavior doesn't disappear. Buffett didn't invent this. He recognized it, early enough to matter. Now here's the uncomfortable question. If the secret is this simple, why doesn't everyone do it? Because it doesn't feel like winning, at least not at first. There's no excitement, no rapid payoff, no constant feedback, just slow, steady accumulation. And in a world that rewards speed, that's easy to ignore. But the math doesn't care about your feelings. Compounding is indifferent. It rewards consistency. It punishes impatience. Coca-Cola didn't become a billion-dollar outcome overnight. It became one because it kept doing the same thing over and over at massive scale, and Buffett aligned himself with that process. Not perfectly, not magically, just consistently. Now let's add one more layer, because this is where things get a little more complicated. What happens when the world changes? Health concerns rise, consumer preferences shift, sugar becomes controversial. Does the machine break? This is where durability gets tested, and Coca-Cola adapts. It expands into new beverages, water, juices, low-sugar options. It evolves, without abandoning its core. Buffett doesn't panic, because he's not betting on a single product. He's betting on a system that knows how to adjust. That distinction matters a lot. Now we're at the edge of the story, the part where the lesson stops being obvious and starts being uncomfortable again. Because if Buffett's Coca-Cola bet worked because of habit, scale, and pricing power, then the real question isn't about Coca-Cola. It's about what other machines like this exist, right now, hidden in plain sight, ignored because they're not exciting, dismissed because they're too simple, and, more importantly, whether they still exist at all. Because the world today moves faster, attention shifts quicker, habits are more fragile, or at least they appear to be. So, is this strategy timeless? Or was it a product of a slower era? That's the tension. Buffett's Coca-Cola investment feels like a blueprint, but it might also be a relic. A reminder that the biggest opportunities don't always look like opportunities until it's too late. And maybe that's the real takeaway. Not that you should find the next Coca-Cola, but that you should understand the system well enough to recognize it if you ever see it. Because when you do, it won't feel obvious. It won't feel urgent. It won't feel exciting. It will feel boring. And that might be the only signal that actually matters. So the next time you see a business that everyone ignores, ask yourself one question. Not, is it growing fast? Not, is it trendy? Not, is it exciting? But something much quieter, much harder to answer. Is this inevitable? Because if it is, then the outcome might already be written. You just haven't waited long enough to read it.